Good morrow, scholars. Welcome to Iguana Theater, starring Iggy and Ben Iguana. There I am. Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Five Nights at Freddy's, The Twisted Ones. I only read it correctly because I'm reading it on the screen. Now, this episode's going to be up relatively late, mostly because I made nachos last night and had a tiny bit of a party, and then had to take my brother to work, and Iggy had to go in the tub, and I had to clean out his cage and then get him out of the tub. And my poor little puppy Jessie, as old as she is, needs help walking around. Anyway, we are in Chapter 5, page 86. That's not good. We are learning all the time. Hopefully at least some of you are learning right here in this class. Dr. Treadwell's students laughed nervously, but she continued over them. It had apparently not been a joke. When we learn, our minds must decide where we will store that information. Unconsciously, we determine what group of things is most relevant to and connect it to that group. This is, of course, only the most rudimentary explanation. When computers do this, we call it an information tree. Is that true? I have no idea. Charlie was only half listening. She knew this already and was taking her notes on autopilot. Since their expedition to Freddy's the day before, she hadn't been able to get the image of Dave's body out of her head. His torso and the gruesome lace of scars that had covered it. When he was alive, he'd shown them off to her, boasting of his survival. While he never told her what had happened, it must have been an accident. He used to wear those suits all the time. She could see him now, before all the murders, dressed as a yellow bunny and dancing merrily with a yellow bear. She shook her head suddenly, trying to get rid of the image. "Are you okay?" Artie whispered. "Sorry." She nodded, waving him off. "I am no stranger to that." "But the dead man in the field, that wasn't an accident." "Someone forced him inside." "But why?" Charlie restlessly tapped her fingers on her desk. "That will be all for today." Dr. Treadwell set her chalk down and stalked off the auditorium stage with a purposeful step. Her teaching assistant, a flustered graduate student, teaching assistant, is that what it's? I don't have no idea anyway, scurried forward to collect the homework. "Hey, do you have any time to go over some of this?" Artie asked Charlie as they gathered up their things. "I'm in a little bit over my head in this class." Charlie paused. She'd promised to make up her first date with John, but she wasn't meeting him for over an hour. Now that she'd been to Freddy's, Charlie almost felt like she was on familiar ground, even if it was soaked in blood. "I have some time now," she told Artie, who lit up. "Great! Thanks so much. We can go work over at the library." Charlie nodded. "Sure." She followed him across the campus, only half engaged, as he explained his difficulties with the material. They found a table, and Charlie opened her notebook to the pages she'd taken down today, pushing them across so Artie could see them. "Actually, do you mind if I sit next to you?" he asked. "It's easier for both looking at the same thing, right?" "Oh, yeah." Charlie pulled her notes back over as he came around and sat next to her, scooting his metal folding chair next to hers, just a few inches closer than she would have preferred. "So, where did you get lost?" she asked him. "I was telling you on the way over," he said, with a hint of reproach in his voice. Then he cleared his throat. "I guess I understood the beginning of the lecture when she was reviewing last week's material." Charlie laughed. "So basically, you want to review everything new from today." Artie nodded sheepishly. Charlie started from the beginning, pointing at her notes as she went. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed her own scribbles in the margins. Charlie leaned in closer, where harsh outlines of rectangles lined the bottom of the page. They were all colored in, like slabs of granite. Ugh. She stared at them with a sensation of déjà vu. They were important. I don't remember drawing that, she thought uneasily. Then, it's just doodles. Everybody doodles. I don't. I can't draw. Can you guys? Anyway. She turned the page to the next segment of the lecture, and a strange alertness rose at the base of her neck, as if someone might be watching her. There were more doodles in the margins of this page, too, and the next one. All of them were rectangles. Some were large, and some were small, some scribbled, and some outlined in so solidly that her pen had wet the paper and torn through it. All of them were vertical, taller than they were wide. Uh-oh. Charlie stared, tilting her head to see it from different angles, until something pinged inside her. Sammy, she thought then, is this you? Does this mean something I don't understand? Charlie glanced at Artie. He was staring at the paper too. As she watched, he turned the page again. The next pages were the same. They were filled in with neat, clear notes, but little rectangles were squashed into every available spot on the page, stuffed into the space between bullet points, crammed into the margins, and tucked away where lines came up short. Huh. Quickly, Artie flipped the page back. He looked up at her and smiled, but his eyes were wary. Why don't you try the first problem here? Charlie suggested. Not now, Mozart. Artie bent over his worksheet, and Charlie stared at her notebook. Her mind kept returning to her father's house, and the shapes she'd drawn only made the impulse stronger. I have to go back. Are you okay? Artie leaned in cautiously. Charlie stared down at her notebook. Now that she'd noticed the rectangles, they seemed more prominent than the notes. She could focus on nothing else. I have to go back. Did you guys ever watch Lost? Never mind. Charlie shut the notebook and blinked hard. She ignored Artie's question, shoving the notebook back into her backpack. There we go. I have to go, she said as she stood up. But I'm still stuck on the first problem, Artie had said. I'm sorry, I really am, she called over her shoulder as she hurried away. She bumped into two people as she passed the circulation desk, but was too flustered to mutter an apology. When she got to the door, she stopped, her guts twisting. There's something wrong. She hesitated, her hand suspended in the air, as if something was blocking her path. She finally took hold of the knob, and instantly her hand felt fused to it, as if by an electrical current. She couldn't turn it, and she couldn't let go. Suddenly the knob moved on its own. Someone was turning it from the other side. Charlie yanked her hand away and stepped back as a boy with an enormous backpack brushed past her. Snapping back into the moment, she slipped out before the door could swing shut again. Yikes. She's absolutely crazy. Anyway, Charlie sped toward Hurricane, trying to calm herself as she drove. The windows were cracked open and wind was rushing in. She thought back to Treadwell's lecture earlier in the week. At every moment, your senses are receiving far more information than they can process all at once. Maybe that was Artie's problem in class. Charlie gazed at the mountains ahead, the open fields on either side, watching them go by. She began to feel like some restraint had been loosened. She'd been spending too much time in her room or in class, and not enough out in the world. It was making her jumpy, exaggerating her natural awkwardness. Yee. She rolled her window down farther, letting in the air. Over the field to her right, a few birds were circling. No. Charlie stopped the car. Something is wrong. She got out, feeling ridiculous, but the last few days had put her on a hair trigger. The birds were too large. She realized they were turkey vultures, and some of them were already on the ground, cautiously approaching what looked like a prone figure. Could be anything. She leaned against the car. Probably just a dead animal. After another moment, she turned back toward her car in frustration, but didn't get in. It's not a dead animal. Turn the page. She clenched her teeth and started to the spot the vultures were circling. As she got closer, the birds on the ground flapped their wings at the sight of her and soared away. Charlie dropped to her knees. It was a woman. Charlie's eyes went first to her clothing. It was ripped up, just like the dead man Clay Burke had shown her. She leaned over to check the woman's neck, though she knew what she would find. There were deep, ugly gouges from the spring locks of an animatronic suit. But before she could examine them closely, Charlie stopped, horrified. She looks just like me. The woman's face was bruised and scratched, which obscured her features. Charlie shook her head. It was easier to imagine more of a resemblance than there really was. But her hair was brown and cut like Charlie's, and her face was the same round shape, with the same complexion. Her features were different, but not that different. Charlie stood up and took a deliberate step back from the woman, suddenly aware of how exposed she was in the open field. Clay. I need to call Clay. She looked up at the sky, wishing for a way to keep the vultures at bay, to protect the body. I'm sorry, she whispered to the dead woman. I'll be back. With weapons? I don't know. Charlie started off to her car, then broke into a run, faster and faster across the field until she ran ran like something was behind her. There we go. She got in and slammed the door, locking it as soon as she was inside. Panting heavily, Charlie thought for a second. She was about halfway between Hurricane and the school, but there was a gas station just down the road where she could call Clay. At the last glance at the spot where the body lay, Charlie pulled out onto the road. The gas station seemed to be empty. As she arrived, Charlie realized that she had never actually seen anyone fueling up here. Is this a working gas station? The place was old and shabby, which she had noticed in passing, but she'd never stopped to look around. The pumps looked functional, though not new, and there was no shelter above them. They simply stood on concrete blocks in the middle of a gravel driveway, exposed to the weather. The little building attached to the station might have been painted white once, but the paint had worn down to reveal gray boards underneath. It seemed to be tilting slightly, slipping on its foundation. There was a window, but it was filthy, almost the same colored gray as the building's outside walls. Sorry. Charlie hesitated, then went to the door and knocked. A young man answered, about Charlie's age, wearing a St. John's College t-shirt and jeans. Yeah? He said, giving her a blank stare. Are you open? Yeah? He was chewing gum and wiped his hands on a grimy rag. Charlie took a deep breath. I really need to use your phone. The boy opened the door and let her in. There was more space inside than she'd thought. In addition to the counter, anyone else having flashbacks to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Was it just me? I don't know. Anyway. Where was I? In addition to the counter, there was a convenience store, though most of the shelves were empty and the line of refrigerators at the back was dark. The young man was looking at Charlie expectantly. Can I use your phone? She asked again. Sorry. Phones for customers only, he said. Okay. Charlie glanced back at her car. I'll get gas on the way out. Sorry, I don't know. Pump's broken. Maybe you want something out of the cooler, he said, nodding at a grimy freezer with a sliding glass top and a faded patch of red paint that must have once been a logo. We've got popsicles. I don't want... Fine, I'll take a popsicle, Charlie said. Pick out any one you want. Charlie leaned into the cooler. Pale, glassy eyes stared back at her. Beneath them was a furry red muzzle, its mouth open and poised to snap. Charlie screamed and hurtled backward, banging into the shelf behind her. Several cans fell off the shelf and rolled across the floor. The sound echoed in the empty space. What is that? Charlie yelled, but the boy was cackling so hard he was gasping for breath. Peering back inside, Charlie realized that someone had placed a taxidermic animal in the cooler. Maybe a coyote? That's sad. I like coyotes. That was great, she finally managed to say. Charlie drew herself up, shaking with rage. I would like to use your phone now, she said coldly. The boy beckoned her to the counter, all smiles, and handed her a rotary phone. No long distance, though, he warned. Charlie turned her back and dialed, walking toward the cooler as the phone rang. She peered in the top, suddenly the stuffed canine, the stuffed canine from the high angle. What is wrong? Clay Burke here. Clay, it's Charlie. Listen, I need you to meet me. It's another. She glanced at the young man behind the counter, who was watching her intently, not trying to hide the fact that he was listening. It's like the thing you showed me before, with the cows. What? Charlie, where are you? I'm at the gas station a few miles from you. Looks like someone painted an outhouse. Hey! The boy behind the counter straightened for a moment, taking offense. Right. I know where you're at. I'll be right there. There was a click from the other end. Let's see, how many more pages? Oh. More than I thought, but not as much. Anyway. Thanks for the phone, Charlie said begrudgingly, and left without waiting for a reply. Charlie crouched again where the woman's body lay. He looked up anxiously at the road for Clay's car, but it didn't appear. At least the vultures had returned. I've got allergies. I could just stay in the car until he gets here, she thought. But Charlie didn't move from her spot. This woman had died horribly and then been abandoned in the field. Now, at least, she didn't have to be alone. The more Charlie looked at her, the harder it was to dismiss the resemblance. Charlie shivered, even though the sun was warm on her back. She was filling with a cold, crawling dread. Charlie? Charlie spun around to see Clay Burke, then sighed and shook her head. Sorry, I got here as fast as I could, he said lightly. She smiled. It's okay. I'm just on edge today. I think that's the third time I've jumped in the air when someone said my name. I wonder why. Clay wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the body. He knelt carefully beside it, scrutinizing it. Charlie could almost see him filing every detail away. She held her breath, not wanting to disturb him. Did you touch the body? He asked sharply, not looking away from the corpse. Yes, she admitted. I checked to see if she had the same injuries as the man. Did she? Yes, I know she was killed the same way. Clay nodded. Charlie watched as he got up and circled the woman, dropping down to look more closely at her head, and again at her feet. Finally, he turned his attention to Charlie again. How did you find her? He asked. I saw birds, vultures, circling above the field. I went to check. Why did you go check? His eyes were hard, and Charlie felt a trickle of fear. Surely Clay didn't suspect her. I would. Why wouldn't he? She thought. Who else would know how to use the spring locks? I bet he could come up with a million theories about me. Twisted girl avenges father's death, acts out psychodrama, film at 11. I'd watch that movie. I might have. I checked because of the body you showed me. It was in a field. I thought it might be another one. Oh, I completely missed a sentence. She took a deep breath, meeting Clay's eyes. There we go. She kept her voice steady, or as steady as she could. Steady as she goes. Anyway. Clay nodded, the steely expression slipping from his face, replaced by worry. Charlie, this girl looks like you, he said bluntly. Not that much like me. She could be your twin, Clay said. No, Charlie said, more harshly than she intended. She looks nothing like my twin. Clay gave her a puzzled look, then comprehension dawned. I'm sorry. You had a twin, didn't you? Your brother. I barely remember him, she said softly, then swallowed. All I do is remember him. I know she looks like me, she added weakly. We're right near a college town, Clay said. She's a young white female with brown hair. You're not a rare type, Charlie. No offense. Do you think it's a coincidence? Clay didn't look at her. There was another body found this morning, he said. Another girl? Charlie drew closer. Yes, as a matter of fact. Been dead for a couple of days. Probably killed 2 nights ago. Charlie looked down at him in alarm. Does that mean this is going to keep happening? Unless you think we can stop it, he said. Charlie nodded. I can help, she said. She looked again at the woman's face. She's nothing like me. Let me go to her house, she added abruptly, seized by a sudden impulse to prove it, to gather evidence that she and the victim were not the same. What? Her house? Clay said, giving her a dubious look. You asked me to help, Charlie said. Let me help. Clay didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the woman's pockets one by one, searching for her wallet. He had to move the body to do it, and she jerked a little as he did, like a ghastly puppet. Charlie waited, and at last he came back with her wallet. He handed Charlie her driver's license. Tracy Horton, she read. She doesn't look like a Tracy. You got the address? They scanned the road for police cars. Charlie read it quickly and handed the license back. I'm going to give you 20 minutes before I radio this in, he told her. Use it. Tracy Horton had lived in a small house off of a back road. Her nearest neighbors' houses were visible, but Charlie couldn't imagine that they would have heard her scream, if she managed to scream at all. There was a small blue car in the driveway, but if Tracy had been taken from her home, since presumably she hadn't just been wandering through that field, it easily could have been hers. Charlie pulled in behind the car and went to the front door. She knocked, wondering what she was going to do if someone answered. I really should have thought this through. She couldn't be the one to inform a parent, spouse, or sibling of this young woman's death. Why did I assume she lived alone? No one answered. Charlie tried again, and when there was still no response, she tried the door. It was unlocked. It'd be funny if her neighbors saw her out there but thought it was just her. Not funny, haha, just funny, strange. Anyway. Charlie walked quietly through the house, not really sure what she was looking for. She glanced at her watch. 10 of the 20 minutes had passed just driving here, and she had to assume that the police would get here faster than she did. Why did I follow the speed limit the whole way here? The living room and kitchen were clean, but they conveyed no information to her. Charlie didn't know what peach-painted walls said about a person, or the fact that there were 3 dining room chairs instead of 4. There were 2 bedrooms. One had the sterile air of a guest room that was slowly being taken over by storage. The bed was made, and clean towels were folded on the chest of drawers, but cardboard boxes filled a quarter of the room. The other bedroom looked lived in. The walls were green, the bedspread pale blue. Oh, that's nice. And there were piles of clothing on the floor. Kind of sounds like my room. Never mind. Charlie stood in the doorway for a moment and found she could not go inside. I don't even know what I'm looking for. This woman's life would have been sifted through, or would be sifted through to the last grain by trained investigators. Her diary would be read, if she had one. Her secrets would be revealed, if she had any. Charlie didn't need to be a part of it. She turned and walked quickly but quietly back to the front of the house, almost running down the front steps, standing by the car. She checked her watch again. 6 minutes before Clay called in the body. Charlie went to the little blue car and peered inside. Like the house, it was neat. There was dry cleaning hanging in the back window and a half-empty soda in the cup holder. Oh, that's interesting. She walked all around it, looking for something. Mud in the tires, scratches in the paint. But there was nothing unusual. 5 minutes. She walked briskly through the unkempt grass that bordered the sides of the house. When she reached the backyard, she stopped dead. Before her were 3 huge holes in the ground, longer than they were wide. They looked like graves, but at a second glance they were too messy, their outlines poorly defined. Charlie walked around them in a circle. They were lined up next to one another, and they were shallow, but the dirt at the bottom was loose. Charlie grabbed a stick off the ground and poked into the middle hole. It went in almost a foot before it was stopped by denser soil. The dirt dug out of them was strewn messily about. Whoever dug these holes had carelessly tossed it everywhere, not bothering to pile it up. 2 minutes. Charlie hesitated for another moment, then lowered herself into the middle hole. Why? Her feet sunk into the loose dirt, and she fought to steady herself, catching her balance. It wasn't too deep. The walls came up to her waist. She knelt and put her palm against the wall of the grave. The hole, she reminded herself. The dirt was loose here, too, and the wall was rough. Something had been hidden here, under the ground. The air is growing thin. I am running out of oxygen, and I will die like this, alone in the dark. Charlie's throat seized. She felt as if she couldn't breathe. She climbed out of the hole and up onto the grass of Tracy Horton's backyard. Charlie took a deep breath, focusing all her attention on pushing away the panic. When she was free of it, she checked her watch. -1 minute. He's already called them. But something kept her there. Something familiar. The loose dirt. Charlie's mind raced. Something climbed out of these. From a distance, a siren was wailing. It would be here in no time. Charlie hurried to her car and pulled out of the driveway, taking the first corner without caring where it would take her. The holes stayed in her mind, the image like a stain. Woo! Okay. So yeah, like I said, late start. I'll have this uploaded as quickly as possible. It shouldn't be too much longer. Normally, I try and record ahead of time. I say normally, that only happened like 4 times with this book. But yeah, I had a lot of stuff. I can't think of anything else really. Let me know what you guys thought. That was a really intense chapter, all things considered. And, dang it. Mozart, he's laying on my clothes. Yeah, that's okay. I can't think of anything. I'm probably going to have another episode up of me and Charlie. My friend Charlie, not that Charlie. Lightsabering, so look forward to that. And until next time, goodbye everybody. Let's see, what was I doing?